introduce ourselves. My name is Leonel Mercado.
I'm Eva Jimenez.
So we're working with the Tocolote. We're going to ask you a couple questions, like I said, just to see what kind of activism and see what your impact on the community itself. Want to continue?
Yeah, so you said you have how many years already with this organization? Like 35, 37?
37 years and counting.
And counting, yeah. You want to tell us like how you came to be an activist, like how you started all of this, how it all just began?
Okay. So at one stage in my life, after attending San Francisco State, I was introduced to a program that's called Volunteers in Service to America, or short, the acronym VISTA. And VISTA is the domestic version of what we know or what's called the Peace Corps, right? And so I applied and was accepted as a VISTA volunteer. And my assignment was to work with a nonprofit in the mission community called Real Alternatives Program, and what was then called also the Mission Coalition organization. And so I was given the assignment of working in the development of a youth council in the mission community. And so I accepted the challenge and became involved with the Mission Area Youth Council, which at that point was in its growing stages, and we formed different or various committees to address issues that young people and adults had identified as critical issues in the community. And one of them was the high unemployment in the mission community, and specifically for our youth. So we devised a plan that included an employment committee that assumed responsibility for negotiating with corporations and with city government, but primarily with corporations. And we identified the level of income or profit that they were generating on an annual basis. And the fact, of course, that as mission-based businesses, that they needed to give back to the community, and that the best way that they could give back to the community was by hiring our young people on a part-time basis, either during the summer or during Christmas. And so we began negotiating with a few corporations, including PG&E, what was then called a bakery called Kilpatrick's Bakery, Sears Roebuck, and a host of other companies and corporations based in the mission community. And one of actually two is the entities, primarily Sears Roebuck, refused to meet with us. And so we went through a process of reaching out to their executives locally, regionally, nationally, all the way to corporate headquarters in Chicago. And of course, we reached out to their board of trustees or board of directors. And it was after that effort that they agreed to meet with us. But even after meeting with us, they refused to negotiate for jobs and salaries or wages for young people in the mission. And so we found the need at one point to picket. We were also very involved with the United Farm Workers movement, right? And so we, under the leadership of a gentleman who I have total admiration, unfortunately he passed, but his name was Philly Sala. We agreed to picket Sears Roebuck, and the first picket line that we held had a couple of hundred youngsters and some adults supporting the effort. The second day was about 300 individuals, and the media showed up. The third day, Sears Roebuck management called and said, let's sit down, let's talk, let's resolve this issue, right? And so we did. And it was a very productive dialogue or negotiations. We were able to secure, I believe it was 20 jobs during the summer, paying a bit above minimum wage. And we were fortunate, we brought in what was then Local 2, which represented retailers in San Francisco. And so armed with organized labor on our side, we completed our first successful negotiation with Sears Roebuck, and then we moved on. And so that was my first experience, and I truly, it gave me a lot of adrenaline, and I liked that rush. And so I figured at that point, I always wanted to be a social worker. And I said, nah, that's not really what I want. I don't have that level of patience, type A personality. I like to see results, right? I'm not gonna wait for someone to change it 2-3 years, right? So I figured, community organizing that's my calling. And so I stayed as a community organizer and worked at another nonprofit organization. But then after a while, I realized that it's also about systems. That you can organize, but if there isn't a system in place to create the level or type of change that is necessary, that it's an effort in futility, right? And so I figured, management, sounds like an opportunity, but I wanted to be responsible for change, right? And I figured, change can happen if you're at the top, right? As an executive director, and so that became my goal. To run a nonprofit, preferably in the mission community. And I was given an opportunity to serve as a representative of what was called then a central committee. I don't know if you're familiar with those kind of structures, but I assume you'll recognize the name Mao Zedong.
Mao Zedong.
Okay, look him up. China is the socialist, communist, I guess you can, right? But they had developed this approach that it was a process that basically allowed you the opportunity to exert leadership, but through a consensus process, right? A central committee, right? We call it differently now, but it's right the same theory approach. And so after a while, there was a study that was conducted by a community assessment that was conducted by the Mission Coalition organization that identified this site as a site that was underutilized. It was underutilized because number one, it didn't have much funding. It had $180,000. Also, its buildings were in very bad condition, so there were no services. And they were looking for an executive director, and I figured, it's worthwhile. And so I decided to apply. In my organizing activities, I became very close to a couple of individuals who I still maintain a very solid working relationship. One of them is Nancy Pelosi, when she first ran for Congress.
Right.
Yeah, and the other's former Mayor Art Agnos. We're still friends of this organization, strong allies of Mission Neighborhood Centers. And it was with their support that I approached the board of directors for Mission Neighborhood Centers and applied for the job. The job was not, basically they didn't hire me. The reason that they gave me was that I was too young and inexperienced. And so I said to myself, well, let me show them, right? And so I was able to mobilize a group of friends, and they in turn communicated with the board of directors, including, she's deceased now, Rosario Anaya, who was a Board of Education member and a community activist. And she was one of 3 individuals who approached the board. The board gave me a second chance, and I came in for my second interview. And they decided at that point to hire me. And that's how I began this long trek that I will conclude in 1.5 years with a new leader on board, with a new vision, right? With a new drive, and who I hope will take this organization to the next level. So that's basically a brief history of, obviously a lot has happened.
Right, of course.
Right? Tremendous growth. But I have to be honest with you, the growth primarily has been attributed to a couple of factors. Number one, I always maintain that socio-economic issues that affect our communities, right? Our community, Latino community, also affect the African American population and the Native American population and even Asian American API, right? And so I've always made it a priority to network consistently with communities of color. And so that when we speak, we don't speak just as Latinos, but as often as possible, right, with other community leaders from other communities of color. And that's been an effective approach. I've also maintained that inclusiveness, right, from decision making all the way to community activism is what gives credence, right, to that label that sometimes people just use for the sake of using it, change agents, or community developers, right? It's I think it's the greater the inclusiveness that you practice, the most likely that you will succeed with whatever initiative you identify. And in part of that inclusiveness, I think I also want to give you an example. I've had many opportunities to move this office to downtown, many opportunities. I've resisted those offers, no matter how beneficial they were for us financially, as we were getting free space, right? Because I wanted to be part of community. This is a very active senior center, and I wanted to be part of it. We also have a Head Start, 2 Head Start classrooms in this building, and I wanted to be part of it, right? That has given me, in so many instances, the opportunity when I'm feeling stressed, right? When I'm feeling like there's no ending to what we're doing, right? Just to spend a few minutes in a Head Start classroom, right? Or with our seniors. It's like not just reinvigorating, okay? Or revitalizing or reviving, or it's more than that. It's just, you walk out of there with a new soul, you know? It's just totally reaffirming that you're doing the right thing, no matter how difficult, no matter what obstacles, no matter what barriers, right? Your responsibility, my responsibility, is to overcome those barriers and move forward. And I've done that consistently, and my staff, our staff also practice the same approach. Just spend a little bit of time, right, with our folks, and you'll understand there will be more than a meaning to what we do. It's greater than that.
Thank you for that. I just kind of wanted to, so what would you say are one of your strengths as a community organizer?
Pardon?
What would you say is one of your strengths as a community organizer?
Oh, being transparent, being honest, being a person of my word.
Of course.
And I appreciate that. That my mother always said, right? En el final es tu palabra la que cuenta y nunca la quiebres. And so I have done my utmost to make sure that when I give you my word, I will stay with it no matter what. And there's been some consequences to that too.
So you already kind of talked a little bit more about your accomplishments as what you've done. But looking back in the days, is there anything you would have done differently?
Done differently.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I would have pursued a graduate degree and perhaps even a PhD. I think at times not having that background, that academic, background, made it a little bit more difficult, right? At this stage, it's fine. I look at my accomplishments and those who know me quite well, right? And especially those who don't know me, by the way. Most people think that I have a PhD, right? And that's, hey, whatever. Sure. I say nothing. Right? I'll accept a compliment anytime. But it's practicum is great. In the practice itself, right? You will get to the stage where you will invalidate certain theories because it just doesn't work, right? But the beauty of academics or academia and your background in academics is that you're not guessing any longer, right? You immediately identify a theory to the practice versus the other way around, right? And so it makes your job easier, right? I don't have to constantly read books, right? It's already part here, right? And so it makes the job easier.
Right.
Makes the job easier. Not necessarily a prerequisite, but it makes the job easier. And so I would have done that differently. On the other hand, if I would have pursued that track, it definitely wouldn't have given me the time to engage in the level of activism and community organizing that I practice.
Right.
So there's two sides to it, right? But
Of course.
that's about the only thing, right? Other than that, I wouldn't change anything. I am proud to be who I am, the accomplishments that we have made as an organization in our collective efforts to bring about change in our community, to improve the lives and conditions, right, in this community. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
So I know you have you have to be somewhere, but just really quick, do you have any words of advice for young adults, kind of like us too, wanna be a part of community organizing? Any advice?
I think we've lost that, compañera, and it saddens me a lot. And te juro, that I'm not the only one that looks at it from that angle. There's many of us in our community. In the mission community, in the next 3 years alone, we have 7 executive directors from nonprofits that are retiring. And you don't know how fearful we are that we're not going to be able to find skilled, willing, committed, young energy to assume those leadership roles. It just isn't there. The interest is not there, for whatever reasons, right? I would hope that both of you, right, that number 2 could be multiplied by 1,000 times, and that more folks would come out to community and better understand what is the history, right? What were your struggles? Everything that you see in this building, it was not given to us. It wasn't a benevolent act on behalf of any city leader. It was a struggle, right? When I see young people coming into the nonprofit sector, I think folks just take it for granted that it's here. But if you understood how difficult and complex it was, right, to get this table and this computer, and then you would understand, right? You would understand what it, when you say community work, what that means. It's really a very difficult and stressful process, but it is doable.
Of course.
And we're proof that we did it. Imagine what you could do, right? And so what's missing is that understanding of history, right? And the struggles that we have gone through in order to have what we have today.
Just kind of one last minute question. I know how much has the mission changed?
A lot.
Since you began your activism?
In the last 8 years, more or less, there have been approximately 10,000 families displaced. The majority Latinas, right? That is sad. What I see on Valencia Street today is not what I used to see at Valencia Street 10 years ago. What I see on 24th Street, on the 24th Street corridor, is not what I used to see 5 years ago, right? So a lot has changed. I like to think that we can work with the gentrifiers, right? But that, will take a significant leap. They have to be sensitized. They don't understand what was here before, right? And they don't appreciate whether it's our art, our cuisine, our cultural values, in general, who we are and what contributions we have made to this community. So, the mission has changed a lot.
Just because I talk to a lot of people who grew up here, and one of my friends, he says, in the last 10 years alone, it's changed dramatically. Tech companies, all that, it's devastating.
It is. It's devastating.
But we just like to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for taking this time
Yeah.
to be here with us, because I know you have a very busy schedule. We just want to thank you, and thank you for all the work you've done for not just for people of color, but for our community itself.
No, thank you. Thank you for your interest.
Yeah, yeah, of course. This is
What
what
you're, the role that you're discharging right now, right,
Yeah.
is so critical in our community. As you expand your understanding, right, of what what has transpired in this community, it's significant. Congratulations to both of you.
Thank you. We
Right?
appreciate it.
Future leaders.
Of course.